everyone. It's my honor to be here, and I would like to thank first Epoch Foundation for the invitation. The talk today is called How to Hack the University R&D System for Fun and Profit. And that's based on my 10 years of experience working both within the university ecosystem, as well as on behalf of my spin-out company called Takachar. So first, a bit about myself. I grew up in Taiwan for the first 12 years of my life, and then studied physics at Princeton University, as well as the University of Cambridge in the UK. After that, I went to MIT and earned my PhD in biofuels and renewable energy. And that's when I became interested in spinning out the technology I developed there. First, as an entrepreneurial fellow in the Activate or Cyclotron Role program at the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. And then as a postdoctoral fellow at the University of British Columbia, Biomass and Bioenergy Research Group. And this talk is also based on a book that I published earlier titled How to Drink from a Fire Hose. That documents my MIT journey in developing the technology and then spinning that out as a company. And if you are interested in checking that out, the link to the book is below. So my talk today is structured first as an overview of my company, and then I'm going to define what a hardware technology company is and how sometimes it may be useful to utilize external resources such as my universities to help bring such company to commercialization. So first about Takachar, our premise is that a lot of the crop and forest residues, which we call biomass, is often very loose, wet, and bulky, which makes it very expensive and difficult to convert and transport to a centralized place where it can be converted into useful products. And as such, most rural communities are often shut out from the benefits of the bioeconomy, and their only recourse is to burn their residues on site in open air, which not only creates significant pollution, but can also exacerbate catastrophic wildfires in certain places like California. So what we do is that we develop small-scale, low-cost portable systems that can latch onto the back of tractors and pickup trucks and deploy to rural hard-to-access regions to locally upgrade and densify the residues on site into higher-value bioproducts such as fertilizer blends, chemicals, biofuels, etc., requiring no external energy and fuel to run such a unit, and thereby building self-sufficient rural bioeconomies in a way that consumes and produces locally the critical materials without depending on external supply chain, as well as growing the local job livelihood. The core technology was something I developed at MIT starting in 2013, and then subsequently scaled up as a hardware prototype and have been testing that in the field. Our first market is around smallholder agriculture. So meet Mama Jane on the right-hand side. So she owns a 1-acre farm, and often she has to pay very expensive imported chemical fertilizers in order to keep the productivity up. And because of recent COVID pandemic disruptions, as well as other international supply chain issues, she's paying 2 to 5 times the world price for her fertilizer. And what we are able to develop is a locally constituted fertilizer blend that enable her at the same price that she's paying per hectare per season, improve her yield on average by 27% and net income by 50%. This is carried out in conjunction in Kenya with another startup called Sapi Organics. And the core process is that we turn locally available crop residues, in this case, for example, rice husks, into a carbon-rich intermediate that can retain moisture and nutrients more effectively. We then mix it with the requisite nutrients and package it into a standalone government-certified fertilizer, and then distribute it to the local farmers who apply this to their soil, as you can see here. And after using the product, here's what some of them have to say.
One, idio, kalau delay Number 2, ulia woneka excess gain yang kali babisi atau mau nonton
So now that's an overview of our company and its social and environmental mission and how we use hardware technology to accomplish that in the most remote and underserved communities. Now I'm gonna focus a bit on the journey and first define what a hardware technology is. So first, let's make a distinction between software tech and hardware. So software technology are things like Facebook, Instagram, Google, right? Things which you can build essentially by coding and with minimal kind of lab or infrastructure required. Hardware technology, in contrast, are things like SpaceX, where you build $1 million of rockets, or GE, right? It's more than 100-year-old company, right? But they develop a lot of the appliances. And even more recently, infamously, Theranos is a therapeutic company that develops blood testing devices. So in contrast to a software tech company where I guess you worry about, so for a software tech company, there are things that investors worry about and founders worry about, such as, is there a product market fit? Is the market large enough? Do we have a team that's capable of execution? And can we actually subsequently finance it? For hardware technology, all those risks still exist, but there is an additional dimension to the risk, and that is, does the technology work? And the answer is not always. And it's really that part that's the distinguishing factor. And how this pans out is often in a difference in the time scale and investor expectations. A software technology company, for example, could probably raise a seed and then start coding and developing the product, eventually raise a series A and B, and eventually have an exit within a reasonable time frame. Whereas a hardware technology company, the initial technology development could take more than 5 years, such that by the time you reach seed, not only are you requiring larger capital, but you require a lot more time to grow. And investors run out of patience, right? And this initial gap between where you have nothing to where initially you have a validated prototype is called the value of death, where it's really expensive and not a lot of people are willing to invest in something like that. And that's where it makes sense sometimes to work with the universities to distribute that risk and make it a lot more feasible for startups to continue. And there are many ways to work with universities, and I list here a few. And today I'm going to focus just on the first of it, which is intrapreneurship, that is working kind of on your own kind of startup company within the university ecosystem. It started back in 2012 when I was a young PhD student, and I went to Kenya to do some field work to understand how charcoal as a cooking fuel is produced, often from trees that are cut down in rural areas and never got planted back. So I did a lot of interviews with the rural communities and really understood if there's an alternative way to make charcoal from organic or agricultural residues, then there is a significant pollution, not only in terms of environmental saving, but also in terms of the cost saving to the households. At that point, I met Alex Slocum, who is a professor in mechanical engineering at MIT, and he was crazy enough to instill in me the idea of carrying out my startup kind of idea as my PhD work, which I eventually followed. And here are the steps I took. So the first step is to bootstrap, because before you invest a lot of resources and time with the university, you first want to understand that the technology you're working on is actually worthwhile. Right. So before we even engaged in MIT sort of R&D ecosystem, we did a whole bunch of tests with open source, like these are $20 kind of low tech kilns that nonetheless could produce some of the chemistry that we want to see. Right. So we initially did some of this in the rural communities just to make sure that the idea is actually tractable. And then the first step is really to find a champion who will become the PI or principal investigator of the university-led project that can then be funded internally and externally. For me, I was able to find Professor Ahmed Monin, again, in mechanical engineering department, as this champion. And there's no sort of hard and fast rule in finding champion as long as they are really invested in your success and your career. You expect many rejections because not many professors are willing to take on a brand new project that they know nothing about. Sometimes I find luck in having in working with very hands-off established professors who often are already satisfied with portfolio and are open to taking on fun projects like this. And other times you may find more luck with young, ambitious assistant professors who have a pressure of tenure on their back and therefore are more inclined to be productive, including spinning out companies. There are also a lot of entrepreneurial professors who may already be spinning out their own companies. My suggestion is to be careful working with them because they often already have their own ideas, right? So if you want to work with them, just make sure that the idea you have for the company is aligned with their vision. So once you find the scientific champion, the next step is to fundraise to get your project funded if it's not already an internally funded project. And it's not cheap to work with a university, right? I mean, just to take my example, this was back in 2013. There's the stipend, tuition, and prototyping hardware costs, as well as university overhead costs, right? They can add up to 100 to 200K per year, right? And 4 years is more than $500,000. So it's actually takes a lot of effort to secure that kind of funding. I was lucky in that I applied for a few competitive fellowships that sponsored my PhD work. And then MIT also provided some of the internal funding through the Tata Trust as well as the JWAFs. And that really was able to fund the prototype part of our work. Then once we got the funding, the next step is into the R&D, right? So in this case, we started designing and building a prototype. You may not always succeed. Our first prototype ended in utter failure. This was a video of just the prototype combusting flames, and that essentially burned caused a lot of damage. And we had to scrap this and start it from scratch again. We designed another prototype, again, this time more carefully with more informed experts. And we built a lab prototype that we then were able to scale up to a more interesting kind of commercial scale. Through this process, you will publish as expected for research with universities. So don't expect anything you've developed to remain trade secrets with the company. And final step is that as you get out of the university system, you have to take stock of any intellectual property that have been developed. A lot of the times, university will have the first rights to those. So if they waive their rights, then you as a company could potentially patent it yourself and commercialize. The university may also assert their rights to the IP, in which case you can negotiate a license with the university as a spin-out company. Normally that starts as an option agreement where you evaluate the technology and you pay all the patenting costs. And if you're satisfied with the technology, you can move on to a licensing agreement where the university can give you an exclusive or non-exclusive use. You essentially report to them on the milestones and then give them a percentage of revenue or stock or both. So that's a really short and kind of brief summary of how it is like to work with the university on a startup project. Using the entrepreneurship pathway. There are many other pathways, which I don't have the time to go into depth today, but you can ask me if you're interested in those. And if you're interested in the book, here again is the link to the book about my MIT journey. Thank you very much. And thanks again, Epoch, for the talk.